We have heard already about the tabernacle, which was really a tent constructed according to detailed instructions that God gave to Moses while they were still in the wilderness on their way from Egypt to the promised land. Very remarkable, mysterious, mystical, we might even say, the details of this tent. In the tent, there were a number of articles, as we probably know from reading our Bibles. And the chief article was the Ark of the Covenant, which was really a box made of special wood, acacia wood, according to God's specific instructions. It was about 3 3/4 yard, 45 inches by about 2 1/4 inches. So roughly 45. Did I say 2 1/4 inches? I meant 2 1/4 yards. So about 3 3/4 yards by 2 1/4 yards. So 45 inches long by about 27 inches wide. And I don't remember how deep, how tall it was. The lid of that, but the acacia wood of the box was overlaid with pure gold. I think it was inside and outside pure gold. And a lid was made of solid gold, and it was the same dimension, length and width as the box. Obviously, it had to fit that box, special box called the, together with the lid, everything was called the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant. That lid, as I said, was solid gold, the same 45 inches long by about 27 inches wide to fit the golden box beneath it. And on top of that lid, made of the same gold as the cover itself, were figures, golden figures of cherubim, angelic beings. And they were there standing or kneeling, I'm not sure, doesn't say exactly, but their wings were outstretched over the lid. On each end stood a cherubim, kneeled a cherubim with the wings outstretched over the lid. And so they, in a sense, overshadowed the mercy seat. We read elsewhere that God's throne was pictured, or was above the mercy seat in the tabernacle. In other words, it was a special place of God's presence. It was called the Ark of the Covenant. There God said, I will meet with you, speaking to Moses, and I will give you all that I have for you to impart to the children of Israel. It was even said at one point that don't have the high priest come in casually as he would like, as he chooses, because my presence will be there in a cloud above the mercy seat. Whether that cloud was always visible, I don't know. I tend to think that at times it was probably visible, maybe at times not. But God said, I'm there in a cloud above the mercy seat and have him coming only once a year. And then he's to bring blood for this sacrifice, first of all, for himself, sacrifice for sins. And the blood is to be put on the mercy seat and sprinkled before the mercy seat 7 times. And it is to be done first for the priest and then for the congregation. This basically is a picture we're given of the mercy seat. You can easily find pictures of it, of various, well, not always the same thing, but similar on the internet. You go and Google it, you'll see the marvelous pictures. We read then this description of this mystical object. Obviously, it was intended by God to teach us lessons about his presence, about our relationship with him, and how to approach him. It spoke of a number of things. In the ark was in the box itself, the ark was the table of stone, the 10 Commandments, tables of stone. The 10 Commandments, God told Moses that those were to be placed in the ark. And so when the ark was constructed, the commandments, the tables of stone, were in that ark. So there we have a picture of the commandments of God, the law of God, put over it a covering of pure gold. And on that covering, every year, the priest is to smear blood and then sprinkle blood in front of it 7 times. And that would be God's way of making the people, in a very special sense, a special people, acceptable to him as a special nation. And that is to be repeated year by year. That Day of Atonement was the day that the priest entered and sprinkled the blood before the mercy seat and smeared the blood on the mercy seat for himself and for the people. It is obviously a picture of God's justice. How they came up with the name mercy seat, I don't want to get into the intricacies of the language and all of that, but in Hebrew, the word kaporeth, I think it is sometimes translated a lid or cover. But theologians, of course, delve into these things, and so the translation mercy seat is really a theological rendering from the fact that this place, this box, this covering was the place where blood was sprinkled and blood was placed, and there God's mercy was extended to his people. For another year, and year by year, this had to be repeated. So it is a picture of God's righteousness meeting with God's mercies. And in relation to God's law, there was a covering of mercy and of sacrifice. It required sacrifice because God's mercy was not extended casually, but his law had to be covered, had to be fulfilled. In the New Testament, not by accident, Jesus is described in Romans 3 verse 25 using the very same word that God put him forth as the translators have propitiation, meaning to satisfy God's wrath. And the word propitiation is also used in Hebrews chapter 9, where the writer summarizes the description of the tabernacle and the ark and the mercy seat. The same word, hilasterian, I don't remember if I can pronounce it properly, but it's a Greek word, and it corresponds to the Hebrew word kaporeth, But it's a theological rendition, that it's the mercy seat, because there God's justice, God's mercy, God's forgiveness, they all come together, and that is only by Jesus Christ. So he's actually called the mercy seat in Romans 3 verse 25. But to make sense in terms of language, the writers render it that Jesus is our propitiation, our satisfaction, fulfilling the law, just like how that mercy seat covered the law, and making the sacrifice symbolized by the blood to pay for our sins. So now we are acceptable to God. We have heard of the grace that God has extended, and it was paid for by our propitiation, our Redeemer. We have a mercy seat in Jesus Christ.